loud, but he understood. He was in a similar boat. Cyan assumed Luenell had sent him too, but the other man corrected him, saying it was his skill set that got him picked. Even so, his values aligned more with Ashel's than the Emperor's. Cyan tilted his head, asking what sort of skills Boris even had. Boris lifted a hand, pulling in mana from the surrounding air. Cyan watched as he pulled residual traces of his own magic, compressing them into a dense sphere. Something about the sphere's energy felt off. He studied it, then admitted there was something in him, maybe even what he'd been looking for. Looking back now from the present, that might have been the moment the hunt really started. He wouldn't let himself slip up again, which was exactly why giving mana access to someone like Boris was a terrible idea. Boris recoiled at the sudden shift in tone. The aggression caught him off guard, unraveling whatever plan he'd been running. Leximus stepped in, shielding Princess Erin and snapping at Cyan to rein it in. Boris tried to smooth things over, claiming it was just a misunderstanding. As a newly appointed instructor, he'd only meant to assess student aptitude. Cyan wasn't having it. That was a weak excuse. He'd never heard of that kind of protocol, and he'd only just learned about the appointment. Boris shrugged, saying he'd step back if they felt pressured, adding a half-hearted apology if he'd made anyone uneasy. Cyan gave a curt nod, accepting the apology but telling him to get lost before things got worse. He kept hold of Arn's hand as he said it. With no room to argue, Boris turned on his heel and walked out, thoroughly thrown off by the hostility. Lunav blinked, clearly puzzled, whispering to herself, wondering if she'd ever even heard of that instructor's name before. Cyan released Erin's hand and muttered an apology for snapping, but she brushed it off, saying she understood and trusted he was on her side. Her cheeks lit up mid-sentence, and flustered, she grabbed Leximus's hand and bolted, muttering something about urgent business. Once they were gone, Lunav turned to him and asked if he knew Boris personally. He said not really, just barely. That surprised her. She'd never seen the guy before. He cut her off, warning her clearly, don't dig into him, don't approach him, stay the hell away. Later, back in his dorm, Cyan cast a candy waterfall spell, thanking Emily and Brian for holding things down while he'd been out. Brian perked up, but Emily looked annoyed, complaining that he kept interfering with her cooking. He smirked, teasing that he thought she liked being cooked for. She shot back that it felt like her job had been yanked out from under her. He turned toward Brian. Training time. They headed to the academy's practice field, but they were late. Someone else had beaten them there. Leximus was already mid-drill, her claymore nearly as tall as she was, moving like it weighed nothing. Cyan wasn't shocked, impressed, sure, but not surprised. She was bound to be called the continent's top swordsman one day. He grabbed the wooden practice sword and told her to show what she'd learned. She paused, confused by the challenge. He rose to his feet and gave her a slight nod. First strike was hers. She hesitated. She had a real blade. He was holding wood. That didn't feel fair, but before she could finish the thought, he lunged at her. She barely managed to parry, rattled by how a wooden weapon could hit that hard. He adjusted her stance, correcting her form. Leximus grit her teeth and launched back at him, warning she wasn't going easy anymore. She charged at him, swinging hard, but he intercepted every strike without breaking a sweat, redirecting each blow with practiced precision. As he parried, he casually threw in a few compliments, admitting he was genuinely surprised at how far she'd come. His tone shifted as he started messing with her, poking at her rhythm, asking if that was really all she had. He told her to stop holding back, to come at him like she actually meant to kill him. She kept going, attack after attack, her breathing picking up. Fatigue crept in, but she refused to let up, still unable to close the distance or land a single cut. Desperate for an opening, she leapt high, aiming from above, but he cut her off midair, slamming her back to the ground. The spar ended with her on the floor, and his sword aimed straight at her face, making it clear who the winner was. He pointed out the obvious. Letting her emotion spiral opened up a dozen weak spots, all of which he had just exploited. She dropped her voice, admitting she didn't even come close to his level, then quietly muttered how nice it must be to have that kind of strength. He reassured her right away, saying she had skill, real, rare skill. Not everyone could handle that kind of sword, especially not as smoothly as she did. She was doing something even veteran knights still struggled with. If she kept up at this pace, he honestly believed no one was going to be able to match her in a duel. She blushed a little, caught off guard by the praise, especially after getting wrecked like that. He shifted the subject, asking Brian to start training with her from now on, then paused, thinking for a second. Of course she was confused. He explained, a little awkwardly, that regardless of her current ability, he had other matters to handle, and couldn't train Brian himself right now, so he was leaving him in her care temporarily. She nodded, saying she'd bring a wooden sword next time so they could get to work. Brian piped up, asking where Cyan was headed. He just said there was somewhere he needed to be. Leximus looked more than fired up to get into the next session. As Cyan walked away, that eerie sensation he'd felt earlier still lingered, creeping around the edges of his awareness. Then he spotted her, Lunav, standing dead center on academy grounds beneath the night sky, unmoving. He walked closer and realized she was watching Boris's tower, eyes fixed on the searchlight. He asked if she was planning to sneak inside. She grinned knowingly, saying he already knew she would. Just curiosity, she claimed. She'd never heard the guy's name before, not even once in the entire Grand Mage Association. For someone labeled an 8th Circle Mage, that was not just weird, it was suspicious. That grin of hers didn't fade. She was clearly sticking her nose where it didn't belong and loving it. Then she turned to him and asked if he was coming too. It felt like he already knew Boris, maybe even hated him a little, enough to get involved. He exhaled heavily. She was dragging them both into a mess, and they both knew it. They waited for Boris to finally step out of his room. Once he was gone, Cyan led the way and cracked the door open with a spell. The room inside was stacked with books, dense with ancient symbols and magical writing. One glance was enough. They both thought the guy was a total academic freak. She picked up one of the texts and flipped it open. Most were heavy on old, forgotten spells, stuff that probably hadn't been used in centuries. Then he froze. He felt Karam slipping away from his body. He asked her where she was going. She answered from afar, saying she was heading to the rooftop, telling him to chill. They could keep poking around the lab. He narrowed his eyes, confused by her sudden departure. Before he could dwell on it, Lunav called him over. She'd found something, a strange, dusty volume older than the rest. From one glance, his expression darkened. This wasn't just any book. It was Hearthcrea, Boris's armor. Meanwhile, up on the roof, Karam lifted her head, catching a foul, almost rotten smell in the air. She muttered that it was already about to emerge. She called to it, Hearthcrea. A presence descended from above. A voice echoed out, calling her by name, saying it had been far too long. 3 centuries to be exact. She forced a grin, anger barely held in check, saying she was doing perfectly fine until he showed up. The voice teased her, saying her personality hadn't changed one bit, joking that maybe that was why she ended up picking Cyan as her wielder. That hit a nerve. She snapped, lunging at him, but he calmly held up a hand, telling her to relax. He wasn't here to fight. He just wanted to talk. She demanded to know what he was really up to, what his endgame was. Down below, Cyan and Lunav were still locked on the old book, Earthkreia. She studied it closely, saying it didn't read like any magic text she'd seen before. It had the structure of a historical chronicle, but everything was encrypted in strange glyphs and codes. Decoding it would take time. She flipped a few pages and pointed out one image, a half-drawn sun. It was the only symbol she recognized, but even that looked off, unfinished. She asked what he thought it meant, a sun, trailing darkness behind it. His face shifted immediately. He slammed the book shut and told her they had to destroy it now. That book was the core of everything, the banquets of blood, and all the disasters that followed. But before they could move, a voice cut in from behind. Boris, calm, cold. Cyan hadn't even noticed him coming, too caught up in the book's danger. Boris casually took it back, holding it in his hand like it was nothing, saying he'd been debating whether to drop by, but now they'd saved him the trouble. He called it an interesting coincidence, but spying, that's where the fun stopped. He lifted a hand and cast a spell, blasting Lunav clean through the window. He apologized, sounding almost sincere, saying Cyan didn't need to worry. She was fine. He'd only sent her back to her dorm. Now that they were alone, he said they should talk. He'd been curious about Cyan, about the version the world saw, and the one hidden underneath. Cyan clenched his fists. This was bad. He wanted Boris dead right now, but Earthkreia complicated everything. The timing was awful. Karim was still gone. Cut to Karim now lying stretched out on the roof tiles. Earthkreia, or what was inside it, spoke again, asking what she thought it all meant. He told her that the one he served wasn't just powerful, he was chosen, blessed by a god. That meant she was already on the losing side. She didn't blink, didn't care, saying she was a demonic sword, not one of Lumendel's lackeys. She wasn't turning on her wielder just because some divine clown said so. He shrugged, saying that was fine. There were ways around that. If she took over Cyan's body, became the wielder herself, she'd be even more dangerous. She laughed, low and sharp, calling the idea stupid and asking what half-baked schemes they were even trying to run this time. Good versus evil, light clashing with darkness, creation opposed by destruction, dualities locked in an endless cycle of conflict. And as always, light wins in the end. That's how the story wraps up, just like all the others. It's been 300 years since the war between gods and demons reached its final blow. Life on the surface is thriving like never before, but gradually the world is moving on. The old legends are fading. Reverence has turned to apathy, and eventually, they came to a decision. After long debates, they agreed. Maybe what the world needed again was darkness. Darkness to make the light shine brighter. Karim scoffs at the reasoning. So what? She takes control of Cyan's body and goes berserk, and then Earthkreia and Lumendel show up to end her and be crowned the new heroes? That's the plan? He nods, grinning, saying that's exactly it. She doesn't take it well, swiping at his face with disgust and calling his whole pitch complete bullshit. Earthkreia sighs, clearly disappointed. He figured a demonic sword's fate was to one day possess its wielder and asks if she's changed somehow. Her temper flares. She snaps that they were the ones who labeled them evil in the first place. They never once tried to understand. They just handled their own crises and dumped the rest on others. He had hoped talking to her would be as smooth as it was with Eru, but clearly not. So he says farewell and vanishes into the night. She stays there for a beat, rethinking everything he said, and her resentment for Eru only deepens. Back inside the lab, Boris offers Cyan a cup of tea. He doesn't bother responding, cutting straight to it and asking why the man said he was so interested in him. The teacher chuckles, saying it's only natural for someone in his position to take an interest in his students. Cyan raises an eyebrow. He's not even in his class. There's nothing left for him to learn here. Boris casually asks if the dean or his father, the duke, know about that. Cyan tells him to stop dancing around and just say what he really wants to say. The mage drops the pretense, asking if they've met before. He says he's been getting this vibe since the beginning, like Cyan despises him, like he wants him dead, but he's certain they've never met. So he wonders if maybe our MC already knows of him. The answer is flat. No, he doesn't know him. What's more shocking is that no one knows him. An 8th Circle mage should be a household name. Boris says he just likes to live quietly. Cyan shoots him a cold look and asks where he's really from. The reply is evasive, claiming it's a small, obscure place he's probably never heard of. But Cyan sees through it. He's lying. He always has been. Even in a past life, he buried his origin deep, refusing to let anyone in. Cyan asks if there's anything else he wants to know, but Boris glances at the time and smiles, saying it's late. They can continue this conversation another day. Once Cyan leaves, Boris speaks to Earthkreia, saying he got so caught up in the moment that he couldn't even think of the right words. But now he understands why Ashel felt so threatened. It's Cyan, the one behind the dying princess, the little brother of the savior, chosen by Lumendel, bonded to a demonic sword. Earthkreia materializes, saying this is what destiny looks like. It's Karim who's supporting him. Maybe he is the darkness they've been waiting for, and if that's true, then he will be the one to make Ashel burn brighter than ever, just like the prophecy. The black fog that blotted out the sun, the savior's bitterness will soon surface. Karim heads to the hall of the black fog. Eru looks up, surprised to see her arriving alone, and asks what brings her here. She doesn't waste time, asking if he really doesn't know, telling him she just ran into Earthkreia, didn't even know he was that close. His expression darkens, asking if the other god tried anything, but she isn't buying his act, saying he already knows everything. So why isn't he doing anything about it? They're the ones being pushed out. He tells her there's nowhere lower than where he's already fallen. He has nothing left to lose. Her voice rises, saying they're trying to use her and Cyan. Eru asks if that's truly what she wants, to protect Cyan. Then he grants her the right, giving her an official decree. All the mist will move with her, she and Cyan together. She asks him if he's really not going to act himself, if something happened between him and Lumendel. He says every decision he's made for her sake. She turns away, saying she's tired of hearing his pitiful justifications. Skolden has turned him into a recluse, a coward, and she walks out of the hall. Elsewhere, a priest finishes a blessing over Alice. She's kneeling as a proxy of Lumendel, pledging herself to the great god of light. The priest asks if she's truly ready to become a beacon in this cruel world. ready to take the front lines, to fight, to die. He calls her by full name. She accepts the vow, pledging herself to Lumendel's cause. Her expression is composed, but her heart isn't fully settled. Is this really the path she should take? Lately, the Empire has been conscripting all its strongest into the Knights' solidarity, tossing them onto the front lines. Even during disasters like the Banquet of Blood, the Royal Guard had no way to respond. She's dreamed of joining the Knights of Light for years, but maybe what she needs to protect isn't out on the battlefield. Maybe it's somewhere else. A voice cuts in. Someone congratulates her from behind. Cecilia. Alice quickly apologizes, saying she should start calling her by name now, since she's just a novice knight. Cecilia laughs, waving it off, saying she can call her normally, at least when it's just the two of them. Alice bows politely, saying she still sees her as a senior and should show respect. They walk together, chatting on a bench. Alice admits she's worried, afraid she may have chosen wrong. Cecilia faces her seriously, saying that's impossible. She's known her too long to believe she'd ever pick the wrong path. Alice confesses she's still torn. The screams from that day, the ones begging for help, still haunt her. Her companion's voice sharpens, saying there's only one way to be sure, only one way to know if the front lines are where she's meant to be. Alice leans in, asking how. Cecilia tells her to come with her. When she heads there, join her. That's how she'll find out. They talk. Villiard has given them a mission, a serious one. Their first real assignment. Alice's eyes widen. Her own father? She hadn't expected that. Brian looked like he was gearing up for something major. Emily noticed the sudden urgency and asked where he was off to in such a rush. He shrugged, admitting he had no idea. Cyan told him to get ready, so he did. Nana, sounding unsure, asked if this meant they wouldn't see him for a while. Just then, Cyan stepped into the room and assured her it wouldn't be that long, so there was no need to stress. He turned to Brian, asking if he was all set for the trip and where they were headed. The reply came. Their destination was the Valley of Lamia. At the sound of the name, Emily's expression shifted. She recognized it instantly. It was the same place they had visited last time. Curious, she asked how they were even planning to get there. It was absurdly far. He activated a portal using the ring gifted to him by the Hallmaster, saying this would make the trip quick. They needed to move fast. This was the day Alice was supposed to die. Meanwhile, Alice and Cecilia had finally made it to the front lines. Their commander informed her they'd reached their post at last. He acknowledged the tough road she had taken to get there, expressing pride in her role as one of the Knights of Light. She remained modest, replying that she still had a lot to learn. Sliding down from her horse, she mentioned the Duke was waiting for them now. She took her place behind her father, addressing him with formal courtesy and stating she had come in response to his summons. He let her know that today, the second, third, and fourth princesses were all expected to arrive, and she needed to prepare accordingly. She nodded her agreement. He was exactly as cold as she remembered. Soon after, the group spotted the royal guards approaching from the distance. The entourage had finally shown up. Among them were the third prince, Fabian Severus, and the fourth prince, Neruvian Severus. Both looked visibly bothered and unimpressed by their surroundings. The second princess, Violet Severus, offered thanks for all their efforts. The Duke stepped forward, introduced himself properly, and greeted the royals. Neruvian, clearly impatient, complained that they should just get this over with and leave. This visit was purely symbolic anyway. Fabian remarked that no monsters were going to ambush them out of nowhere. The Duke reassured him that the creatures stationed at the rear were minor threats at best. Besides, their top knight was with them, so they were in safe hands. Ashel emerged right then, noting it had been a long while since he'd seen his father. The older man eyed him with pride, expressing confidence in his ability to handle the job. Fabian gave him direct orders to wipe the enemies out before they even got close. Unlike him, their corpses held actual value. The princess shifted focus, asking about Luenel. He wasn't one to skip official visits like this. Ashel replied that Luenel had handed the task off to him, due to pressing matters elsewhere. Though still unsure, she didn't push it, remarking that she was lucky to have him as her bodyguard instead. Alice shared the confusion silently. Ashel was always seen guarding the first prince, yet here he was, standing beside the royal daughters. She decided to dismiss it as coincidence. He met her gaze, mentioning he'd heard she joined the Knights of Light at the top of her class. His stare carried a chilling, almost violent intensity, and he congratulated her. The look unsettled her. His eyes held a menace she recognized. It reminded her of her 9th birthday, or close to it. Back then, he had gifted her a magical scroll. It was a 4th star spell, far beyond what she could use at the time, clearly meant for later. Years passed, and once she gained her 4th star of mana, she recalled the scroll and prepared to activate it. But just before she could, Cecilia had stopped her, telling her it was a summoning spell, one that would have unleashed a mid-tier monster. If she had triggered that scroll, it likely would have ended with her dead. Now she couldn't shake the thought that he might have known exactly what would happen when he gave it to her. Her suspicions about him only kept growing. The royal convoy, along with their army escort, began moving toward the battlefield. Neruvian questioned why Luenel had sent him to them. Fabian muttered that the whole thing felt sketchy, maybe even deliberate. Someone like him getting slotted in as their personal guard? Definitely worth raising eyebrows. The princess cut in, reminding them that they already knew the kind of person Luenel was. If they didn't want to wind up dead, they'd better stay alert. Suddenly the caravan ground to a stop. Everyone stepped out to check what was going on. They saw Alice sprinting toward them, panicked, yelling about screaming. An ambush had begun. They needed to get out now. The attack came from a rare creature, a Tsarayurk. The ground dragon let out a piercing roar, sending a wave that hurled soldiers backward. The guards didn't stand a chance. Alice rushed to pull the princesses out of danger. The beast's tail came crashing down, aiming to smash through the guard lines, but she summoned a mana shield to block it. The barrier gave just enough time for the princesses to escape. She couldn't believe it. How had a high-level monster ended up this deep into their secured territory? Something wasn't right. Down in the dirt, the princess heard Ashel speak up, vowing to protect them and urging them to come closer, and that's when it hit her. This whole ambush might have been part of his plan, a way to kill them under the cover of chaos. Right then, Cecilia arrived, launching her Wind Blossom spell to drive the monster back briefly. Alice grabbed the princess's hand, trying to lead her to safety. Something felt horribly off. Back when he looked at Violet, there had been real bloodlust behind his eyes. She glanced back and saw him standing next to the dragon like he belonged there. She shouted his name, telling him to watch out. A barrier flared up around Ashel, launching the monster backward with force. He clicked his tongue in irritation after noticing that both the princess and Alice had already slipped away. The creature lunged again, but he, now visibly pissed, leapt into the air and struck it down in a single blow. Elsewhere, Violet, Alice, and Cecilia were sprinting toward a safer zone. Suddenly, Violet stumbled and collapsed onto the ground. Alice rushed to her, checking frantically if she was all right, offering a hand and asking if something was wrong. The princess gave a faint smile and said she wasn't going down that easily. Before Alice could react, a blade drove straight into her body. Cecilia had attacked from behind. Betrayal as brutal as it was unexpected. Shocked and reeling, she managed to gasp out a question, asking why her friend would do this. She crumpled to the dirt, a vital organ pierced, shrieking in agony. Violet stood over her, explaining that she was Ashel's younger sister. She had suspected something was off the moment she learned Luenell wasn't attending, especially given how obsessed he was with being part of everything. She believed this was all a ploy to quietly remove them under cover of chaos, letting others take the blame while they stayed clean. Alice tried to explain, insisting she only wanted to protect people, but Violet cut her off, saying she already knew how power-hungry the Verts and Luenell were. She mocked the idea of sitting still and waiting to be executed like a fool. She told her to spit out her last words while she still had seconds to spare, laughing as she added that maybe Luenell would swoop in and rescue her in time. She tossed down a scroll, an emergency teleport and summon spell, to warp both herself and Cecilia away. Left behind, Alice lay stunned. She couldn't wrap her head around what Cecilia had just done. Some part of her refused to believe the betrayal was real. Maybe it was mind control, maybe there was another reason. Tears slid down her face at the thought that her closest friend had turned against her. She glanced around. The area was crawling with monsters. Forcing herself to rise, she whispered that she had to pull it together. This wasn't where she was going to die. She had to survive, and she needed to know why her friend had done this. Blood seeped from her wound, and she used it to enchant a spell, turning it into razor-sharp blades. Meanwhile, Violet and Cecilia reappeared inside a secured safe house. The princess looked much more at ease now. Cecilia was quiet, clearly trying to mentally erase any trace of Alice or their shared past. Violet asked why she'd spared her. There had been plenty of chances to finish her off. She reminded her that the order had been to kill, not let her go. Cecilia calmly replied that Alice wouldn't last long anyway. The monsters would finish the job for them. Back in the field, Alice was holding her own, fending off the creatures with what little strength she had left, but her body kept giving out. She kept thinking, what the hell was she supposed to report to the knights? No one would believe that Princess Violet had tried to kill her. She shook it off and focused on survival. Escape came first. Then she turned and saw it, a lava salamander. Not just any beast, but a top-tier monster. If she didn't get out now, she was toast. The salamander began charging a fiery blast straight at her. Her body wouldn't even twitch. Right before it unleashed the attack, Cyan materialized, slicing through the creature mid-charge with rushing fog sword.